maybe that's the bit, is that Chucky's poly now.
I think he is. I actually think that's not even a bit. I think that's like an actual, I know they're like playing with Chucky's sexuality. And we here at Branson Reese take our hats off to them. Hell yeah.
In 2017, Universal Studios announced the birth of a new shared universe of monster movies, bringing their classic horror icons into the contemporary franchise film landscape. But after the critical and financial failure of its first installment, the project was indefinitely abandoned. Now, in 2023, the powers that be have called upon one pulp horror devotee and one snarky film critic to unearth the concept. I'm Dylan Roth.
And I'm Dalton DeShane.
Are you afraid of the dark universe?
Welcome back to Are You Afraid of the Dark Universe, the podcast where we attempt to resurrect Universal Studios' failed cinematic universe of monster movies, one pitch at a time. I am the first host, Dalton DeShane.
I am the alternate first host, Dylan Roth.
And together, we have been building out the Dark Universe into an ongoing narrative to rival the MCU.
Yeah, we are, deep into this project now. If this is your first episode, welcome. We are in phase 3 of the Dark Universe.
And today is the day that many of our fans have been waiting for. We are going to hear a pitch for a movie that has been requested so much in the Discord, has inspired so much discussion.
Yeah, since before we had the Discord,
yes,
we would get questions about this movie and what we would do with it. Since for as long as we've had listeners.
I mean, and you and I have been talking about it since the very beginning.
But now I'm so glad to abdicate this particular responsibility to someone much funnier than we are.
So basically, in between all of the canon installments that you've been hopefully listening to, if you've been listening to the podcast, we've been inviting our favorite storytellers into our little brainstorming office here to look into the past of Universal Pictures' catalog for other properties that we can potentially remake and fold into the Dark Universe. So our guest this week is a cartoonist and comedian, best known as the creator of the comic strip and animated series Swan Boy, and the co-creator and host of the actual play podcast Rude Tales of Magic, and, like so many of our guests, one of the best posters on the web. Please welcome, everybody, to the Dark Universe, Branson Reese.
Hi, fellas. Thanks for having me.
And Branson, please tell our audience what movie we're talking about today.
Oh, folks, you're in for a good one. We're talking, what year is it? We're talking 1948's Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.
Yes, we are diving finally into the Abbott and Costello Universal monster movies. We have the debates on our Discord over who the modern day Abbott and Costello would be for the Dark Universe have been raging. We don't know if you've picked someone modern or if you want to literally reanimate Bud Abbott and Lou Costello.
I mean, they're playing characters. You could do whatever you want.
We could just have them be Chick and
but we've specifically
Chick and, what's the other guy's name?
It starts with an A.
I just remember Chick because the whole movie they're going
Chick. But it's so hard because you just think of them as Abbott and Costello, so trying to remember the name of the actual characters is almost silly.
I just watched it. It is insane. Yeah, it's Chick and Wilbur.
Wilbur, that's right.
I was thinking Alfred. Literally, I watched this movie today.
Yeah.
It's really shameful that I couldn't remember. But they're Abbott and Costello.
They're Abbott and Costello.
The name of the actors is the title of the film. Yeah. So we don't know what you have planned, and we're going to wait to find out because, as always, we're going to start by talking about the movie that exists, the source text.
But before we get there, Branson, we would love to know, what is your history with the Universal Monsters? Do you have a history with Abbott and Costello in general, or is this your first time coming to Abbott and Costello? What's your background?
They're
with
old friends to me at this point. I've seen I saw this. So I don't know what I saw first. I think my first introduction to Abbott and Costello is the original Tweety Bird short, A Tale of Two Kitties, when Tweety Bird is still naked before he gets paired with Sylvester. It's an old Bob Clampett short. And instead of being paired with Sylvester, he's paired with these two cats called Babbitt and Catstello, who are Abbott and Costello.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that as a kid. I just was like, those cats are great. Why don't they ever come back in any other cartoons? They're amazing. The Catstello, the Lou Costello cat keeps shouting, Babbitt! And it that is so...
You are jogging
just cemented into my brain. But also pretty young. we would have rented Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein because I loved all the Universal monsters as a kid. But I didn't know what was Universal and what wasn't. Like I thought King Kong was like a Universal monster.
On and off, on and off, he has been, right? So,
has he? I thought he was not.
No, the '76 King Kong was Universal, and so was the Peter Jackson. So, but those we talked about in the previous episode. The rights to King Kong are all fucked up. But I'm curious, especially like as you're a cartoonist and like you've created an animated series, and like I also follow you on Letterboxd, and I see you always log when you watch a classic Tex Avery short or an old Merry Melodies or something. Are you somebody who grew up watching like the Bob Clampett show or the Tex Avery show like Sunday nights on Cartoon Network and like getting to know like, oh, this is the director's work in the Looney Tunes oeuvre?
Yeah, I do have sort of like an auteurist like brain for Looney Tunes from. I had a book when I was a kid. I actually have it as an adult too. It's here somewhere. That was all about like it broke down each director and like this is their style. This is and it's flawed because it's like it just gives you the big guys. Like I didn't know who Frank Tashlin was until I was an adult. Like you miss out on a lot. Like I didn't know about like Harmon and Ising when I was a kid, like these other players that I didn't know about a lot of the story guys like Mike Maltese or Heck Allen or these guys, so I would learn about like Tex Avery cartoons are this way, Bob Clampett cartoons. The first thing I noticed was I was like, in some of the cartoons, Elmer Fudd looks like a baby. Like sometimes he looks like Elmer Fudd and sometimes he looks like a man who's like dying and who's becoming a baby. And like, who did those? Because I got to figure out what's going on. And those were Bob Clampett. And that was like, my in to learning about all those. So that was from a book, but I don't remember. I remember the Tex Avery show. I don't remember a Bob Clampett show.
It was one of those things that they used to do on Sunday nights before there was an Adult Swim. They would do all of these auteur-driven collections with behind-the-scenes information. They would just do, okay, here's a bunch of Warner Brothers controlled sketch shorts, usually Looney Tunes, Merry Melodies things from that particular director, and they'll dig into it a little bit. There was the Chuck Jones show, the Tex Avery show, and the Bob Clampett show. And that was between that and like a Laserdisc set that I grew up with all like the golden age Looney Tunes. I think that actually capped out in 1950. And you were just jogging. Really? You just jogged my memory so hard with that sketch with the Abbott and Costello cats.
Well, I would imagine, with that sketch that there's probably a lot of overlap between these early cartoons and the vaudeville guys, right? Which is what Abbott and Costello are. They came out of the vaudeville tradition.
I'm like obsessed with this world now, and I'll still watch cartoons and be like, I have no idea who the fuck that guy is. Like it's I'm 35 and I'm like obsessed with this, and still it's like this guy who they're clearly making fun of appears in one short, and the most I can tell is like his ears were small.
That's it. Right, because they're not all Peter Lorre, right? Like people who we would see in movies and we'd be like, oh, that's Peter Lorre. But it's so funny that like we grew up, and I think it's a little bit different now because like when Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon launched in the 90s, they didn't have a big library of original shows. And so they used to play classic stuff a lot. And we'd get those windows into like then urbane pop culture references from like the 30s that some of which we could decode through cultural osmosis, and some of it, like talking about, we just never get. And it's like, we had the Animaniacs was our version of that, right? Where I think if you took somebody who was born in 2000 and watched a bunch of Animaniacs, they'd have the same problem.
Or like fucking even just like Weird Al Yankovic parodies where it was like, I didn't know for, sometimes like a decade, like what was being parodied. I just liked the funny song, you know?
I could not tell you what artist I Lost on Jeopardy was parodying.
Yeah. I remember being at karaoke and two friends of mine sang the Stevie Nicks, Tom Petty, Stop Dragging My Heart Around. And I was like, I'm an adult. And I was like, everyone else knew the song. And I was like, I just know Stop Dragging My Car Around. Like, that's so humiliating.
That's me with like, I Think I'm Alone Now, where I was like, I only know I Think I'm a Clone Now. And I think that song's a banger. So I guess I like the original too.
So this was like one of the ways that you would have gotten acquainted with Abbott and Costello is through these cartoons, but then you said you've gotten really into the vaudeville stuff. So did you then find your way into like the Abbott and Costello proper, and like what was your route through that work?
It would have been through this movie because I remember we rented this movie when I was a kid because I had seen Dracula, I had sseen Frankenstein, and I really liked I was like really responded to like the big Halloween decoration monsters. And I remember it was like years before I saw the Wolfman. So this was my first introduction to the Wolfman as well as Abbott and Costello. And it was just it was either this or the cats, but it was just a general, just sort of, you're a little kid, like, you just take anything, anything that's presented to you. You're like, yeah, I guess that's just the world. I guess that's just how the world. I guess these guys just like hate. One's like sort of a little fat guy, and one's like taller and mean. And I guess they're just like in a bunch of. And so I like thought of them as more famous than they really were, because they're famous from these movies. But like, I don't know, and I like them, but I don't think I could name another Abbott and Costello movie that's not them meeting a monster.
I mean, they were famous. They were really famous at the time, I think, and they had this deal with Universal, and they were pumping out movies like every year, or like I think sometimes even multiple times a year. But it seems like the only thing that's really endured is like Meets Frankenstein. Yeah, like you said, like it's not as much like, Charlie Chaplin or Buster Keaton, who's like just regular movies are still classics. It seems like most of Abbott and Costello's work has faded, besides like obviously like Who's on first,
obviously, yeah,
or like some of the individual bits. But the films themselves, really the only one that's really survived in the cultural knowledge is Meets Frankenstein, although this was just the first of a whole series of Meeting the Monster movies. I have Meets the Invisible Man, I have Meets the Mummy on Blu-ray and stuff, but this is sort of the one that has endured, it seems.
It's got it. I mean, it's not hard to see why. Like, it's got it all. It's very fun. They have a really good dynamic. But it's like, because it's not like they're like the Marx Brothers or something, like it's just like, oh, these are like, how did these guys, I guess they're related. That's how they met each other. But like this is like, three of these guys are like the funniest people who ever lived. Whereas Abbott and Costello, it's like, that definitely, I get why they were popular at the time. And even now, I'm not like drawn to watch, as much as I like this movie, I'm not like pulled to watch any of their non-Halloween stuff,
Yeah, they have the good rhythm together. But even like, it is definitely very hit and miss. Like even in some of the other ones, like I think Meets the Mummy is kind of a big miss, because they're just doing a bunch of like their old vaudeville bits and just kind of squeezing them into this mummy container that doesn't really work. And you can tell they're kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel for the bits, and it's well, sometimes the shtick wears
they've gotten
thin.
To the assembly line.
Yeah.
Whereas this one being the first one, it's also exciting where I did not realize initially, because I had not seen this before we prepared for this episode. I had imagined, okay, you have Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. You have Abbott and Costello Meet so and so and so and so and so. I thought there was a separate Wolfman movie and a separate Dracula movie. No, this is like a big. They don't just meet Frankenstein. In fact, they primarily meet the Wolfman.
Well, and not only that, but it has. This is the only one that has the iconic actors. Like it actually has Bela Lugosi as Dracula, which even a lot of the Dracula sequels don't get that. And you've got Lon Chaney Jr. as the Wolfman, which, to be fair, he was kind of a big Universal team player and came back to be the Wolfman pretty much whenever they wanted. But you do have the original actors here. Besides, there's no Karloff as Frankenstein, because I don't think he ever played it again.
Did they get? I looked it up today. It's like the guy from Gunsmoke or something playing.
Yeah. It's
Frankenstein.
Glenn
It's like
Strange.
Way out of left field, if I recall correctly.
Yeah,
maybe
his name is
I'm not
Glenn
pulling
Strange.
Gunsmoke out of nowhere.
He did Frankenstein a couple of times. But what's funny though is that Abbott and Costello would then do a movie, an Abbott and Costello meets Boris Karloff movie, where Boris Karloff plays a new character.
I need to see that one.
Which is just like a funny thing to have happen. But yeah, this is Glenn Strange as the Frankenstein monster. But apart from that, it's the icons, and you have like the voice of Vincent Price at the end as the
little
man.
Vincent Price cameo at the end is really good.
Unbelievable, right? That's like we got all of them together in one movie, and this is the movie. What a treat! I love it.
Well, and because of it, this movie was a huge hit. This was one of Universal's like biggest hits of the year, which I mean, is definitely why they went on to make a shitload of these. But apparently Abbott and Costello like hated the script and were impossible to work with on this. And I don't think had a lot of high hopes for it. It seemed like they were, I mean, by the late 40s, I think they were also on sort of the downslope of their career. And maybe we're getting a little sick of each other, it seems like, from what I've read. But they still made a bunch of movies together after this. So,
well, this, I don't want to spoil anything, but this does play into my like thinking for who will be Abbott and Costello. I think an important part of Abbott and Costello, and I think you can see it on screen, is they don't like each other.
Yeah.
They don't like I don't know any, like Laurel and Hardy like each other. They need each other. The Marx Brothers are related. Like so many of these comedy duos have chemistry.
Yeah.
And Abbott and Costello, it's like Conan and Max Weinberg. It's just like they don't like being around each other. Bud Abbott does not seem to be acting when he's like, "Shut up, you idiot," to Lou Costello.
Yeah.
And it's funny where like I think about this a lot in terms of the way that I learned a little bit about how like married couples are supposed to function from television. Like despite having like a very functional, loving set of parents at home, I learned from sitcoms that like couples are supposed to hate each other. And like if you learned about friendship from like Abbott and Costello, then you think, okay, a pair of friends is one absolutely like insane, insufferable noise machine, and then someone who hates him but hangs out with him anyway.
That's friends.
And like just backhands him and says, "Shut up." Like that's terrible. That's a terrible thing to model for. I had the same thing with mother-in-laws. I would see that mother like modeled all the time. It was like, "Oh, you hate your mother-in-law." My dad and my grandma on my mom's side got along great. They were friends. They liked each other. Because why wouldn't? Because that's healthy.
You should.
I love my mother-in-law. It's
just
like you see in cartoons. It's like, "Oh, the mother-in-law's coming. Better load up my shotgun so I can take a shot at her." You know, it's insane.
Well, and the Three Stooges really took that like to its farthest thing, where it's just three guys who hate each other all the time
your crew
and are
should
just
be people who
trying
want
to kill each other.
Injure.
I think there's more warmth with the Three Stooges than there is with Abbott and Costello. Because even like a lot of them are related to each other, or like, you know, who could hate Shemp? You know, like they. There's some sort of like backstage warmth there that comes up on screen. And Abbott and Costello, it's like, no, I think their trailers were on opposite sides of the film set.
It's a Sam and Dave situation. They have their dressing rooms and stage left and right. They come in the middle, they do their bit, and
it seems like that was really the case from what I've read of making this movie, that like it was tough just to get them on set together at the same time, which is so weird because the movie relies on their chemistry. That I mean, their whole thing is their comedic chemistry, and it's weird that yes, their timing is still like pretty impeccable together, but without any of that warmth of. It's a weird thing where it's like very technically sound, but emotionally void.
Yeah, they're the Kubrick of comedy. You know, it's like it's this cold. I don't think that's totally true of Kubrick, but you know what I mean. Like,
it's got it down
like
to a science,
perfection.
Yeah,
I think Jerry Seinfeld had said that like Bud Abbott is like sort of the mathematically perfect. I don't want to put words in his mouth. Or fucking cares, you know, but maybe I think he said something to the effect of like he's the mathematically perfect straight man, of like he just does it perfectly, you know, he just does exactly what a straight man does with no frills, no added personality other than like sort of an accent, and that's it.
And then Abbott is literally doing Looney Tunes stuff. Like he is a human cartoon character.
Or maybe like I guess vice versa. Like it had never occurred to me that like apart from that one sketch where it's obviously like their characters are named, like this cat is Lou Costello, I started thinking, being like, oh, fuck, are things that I attribute to Bugs Bunny or Daffy Duck actually from these particular vaudevillians? I
mean, it was all feeding into each other, right? I think like, you know, just sort of the natural growth of comedy around that era, like vaudeville reigned for a long time, you know, and I think definitely informed a lot of that cartoon stuff. But yeah,
I mean, with Bugs Bunny specifically, it's Groucho Marx. He is right. Like, a lot of his stuff is from Groucho
main thing for Groucho.
Daffy is pretty his own thing, and then I don't know if you're interested. Porky Pig is Leon Schlesinger, who was the producer for Looney Tunes, who had a stutter. And everyone who worked at Looney Tunes was a monster. And they were just making fun of their boss's stutter, which is so cruel for a guy who was just letting them get away with anything. They were like, you talk wrong. That's where Porky Pig came from.
But it's so funny to think about, like, I don't want to digress too much about Looney Tunes, but like the idea of Bugs Bunny as the kind of character who could be the straight man or the wacko, depending on the situation.
Yeah.
But so sort of like a one character vaudeville pair. So we have Abbott and Costello here. Now, they're not, despite what the title says, they're not playing Abbott and Costello.
They're Wilbur and Chick.
They play Wilbur and Chick.
I don't know what it is, but the choice of name for Chick is so grating to me. Like, I don't know, just the syllable, the number of times they say Chick in this film. He's constantly yelling, Chick, 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 and it's like a nail in my brain every time. I just want them to be Abbott and Costello.
I feel the way about his name in this that a friend of mine one time, we were talking about, like, what's your desert island album? And he gave the only answer I ever thought was like realistic. He was like, oh, probably like the Beach Boys' greatest hits, so that the desert island would feel fun. You know, it would feel like I'm on vacation or something. Because it's ultimately what he was like saying was like, it doesn't matter if you like it or not. By like a week in, you're going to hate that fucking album, you know? Yeah. Like, and I feel the same way. It's like, it doesn't matter what his name is. If Lou Costello is saying the name more than 4 or 5 times, it's going to be so annoying. As a kid, I was like absolutely on Lou Costello's side. I was like, everyone's being mean to him. He rocks. He's the funny guy. Bud Abbott is too mean. And now rewatching as an adult, I was like, Lou Costello talks like a baby. Bud Abbott is too nice to him. I think we have the names mixed up because Abbott is short, fat guy. Costello that's Lou Costello.
Wait, really? Do I have it backwards?
You have backwards.
I always thought Abbott was the... Okay, I have it backwards then.
Cut that out because you're going to sound like an asshole.
No, that's fine. I can sound like an asshole. I really got it backwards. I meant earlier then that Costello... See, this is what happens when they're not named after their real names, is I get confused.
Of course.
Right.
So Bud Abbott is Chick. Okay.
Right. I had just assumed the name Chick was chosen because it would sound the most like grating.
It sounds so grating.
It is.
So I should clarify that earlier I meant Costello is the human cartoon character. I think I said Abbott because I had them backwards. But
that makes more sense. I do think Bud Abbott is like still sort of a cartoon character. He's just like a cartoon of a jerk, you know?
Is it stupid that like because Costello is the longer name, I associated it with the taller guy? I really think that's where it came from.
Yeah.
Abbott sounds like a short guy's name. Costello sounds like a tall guy's name.
Well,
fix it.
To get into the plot a little bit, I just want to segue into talking about another person who's giving a great cartoon performance, which is there's only a handful of like named characters who matter in this movie who are not in the title of the film. But Mr. McDougal is a customer at the baggage handling, station at the train station where Abbott and Costello work. He's played by Frank Ferguson, and he plays this like businessman like he's the Wicked Witch of the West. Like it's incredible how immediately hostile.
He's a Karen. He's a typical Karen.
He's like sort of he's the character that gets the whole plot into motion because this is a guy who owns a house of horrors, an attraction like a carnival style attraction, and he has purchased and had shipped from overseas 2 crates that inside contain the bodies of Count Dracula and Frankenstein's monster. And he got them for a steal because it's actually part of a plot by Dracula to get shipped overseas.
Which, look, if your House of Horrors has actual like dead bodies in it, it makes sense that you're doing so well. That's to have the actual body of Dracula. I mean, man, that's going to be a tourist destination for sure.
And this also establishes the idea they do not have to reestablish for the characters who Dracula or Frankenstein are. It is a given that they are as aware of Dracula and Frankenstein as the audience is. These are characters from folklore. They are their reputations precede them, but no one thinks that they're real. And so these 2 crates arrive at the baggage handling, and of course you have your 2 baggage handlers. You have Lou Abbott and Bud Costello, and Abbott is holding the place down. He's doing a great job. Costello is making a big mess.
You can imagine the hijinks they get into.
He falls over. He knocks a bunch of suitcases over. I'm sure it's been a few weeks since I watched this. I meant to rewatch it today. I'm 100% sure he says, "I'm a bad whittle boy" after knocking some suitcases down. That's his deal. It is nauseating how baby-like he is in this movie.
There is a beautiful woman who is in love with him. Is the other who's like coming by his work, and
this is Lenore Aubert as Sandra, or as we later learn, Dr. Sandra Mornay.
And Abbott is just like, what the fuck did you do? Why does she like you and not me? And this is sort of a recurring bit throughout the movie. He will later get a second girlfriend. He is in his bigamy era. and Abbott doesn't like it.
But it's sort of a curveball that's thrown at us, which is we meet this 9-year-old boy in a 40-year-old man's body, and then this beautiful woman is making eyes at him and speaking about her devotion to him and how excited she is for their big weekend. Abbott is there to point out how ridiculous that is. But at this point in the film, we have no reason to suspect that this is not for real, this attraction.
And she is selling it like Charles Grodin in The Great Muppet Caper or something.
Where absolutely.
Like, I believe it. Like, she's not to suggest that a guy who looks like Lou Costello couldn't have a beautiful wife or something.
No,
of course,
but the fact that he talks like a 9-year-old boy.
No, it is ridiculous. That is a baby. That is, I'll say it a million times in this episode. He talks like a baby. It's so nauseating.
Naturally, the crates get opened, and the biggest running gag of the movie is that Wilbur/Costello is always catching Dracula and Frankenstein as they are moving around and doing stuff and, being obviously living and monsters. And whenever Abbott walks into the room, they're gone and no one believes him.
All of these Abbott and Costello monster movies make some huge meals out of the whole thing where the monster is sneaking up behind them while they're doing something else, and then they turn around and it's all that kind of Looney Tunes stuff every time there's a monster.
So my friend Sean O'Connor described this. He was like, I love this movie, but I got to take some points away because in the 40s comedy was too easy.
Yeah.
And it's like he makes a compelling point that like it's so simple. It's just what? But I thought, but you, like that is the plot of all of these. I haven't seen the others, but that's certainly the plot of this movie. Or like a joke like, no, you idiot, Dracula's not real. It's like, I know that, and you know that, but does Dracula know that? It's like, holy shit, that joke wasn't taken? That's how old this movie is, It seems like such a no-brainer.
They make the I'll bite joke like twice in a row in one scene. They first I think the Lenore says like I'll bite, and he's like, oh no you don't, and then like a minute later Abbott is like I'll bite, and
you'll have to get in line.
You'll have to get in line. It's like, yeah, they can just.
But the rhythm of it, and then it has this sort of farcical quality where I've been watching a lot of Frasier lately, and obviously Frasier is like the fucking mega evolution of this, where you have like someone's back is turned, they just slightly miss the important information that they need. Everyone's at cross purposes and have incomplete knowledge, but like that's like cranked up to the higher difficulty, right? But I don't know, it made me think a little bit about like if we were doing an Abbott Costello Meets Frankenstein type thing in like 2001, to have Kelsey Grammer and David Hyde Pierce might actually be really good.
They'd be great for it. And they, I think they could sell the dislike too,
Absolutely.
God, they'd be so, you can tell too that these guys cut their teeth on stage because there are a lot of like stage tricks.
Yes.
Happen. I feel this way with the Marx Brothers movies of like, it's such a clear line once they've stopped at, the first few movies are like adaptations of vaudeville shows. And then I think it's like Monkey Business or Horse Feathers. Suddenly they jump to, this is just written for the screen. And so all sorts of different, like they're popping out of barrels in ways that like they're using film language in a way that wouldn't read on screen. And this to me is like, oh, they're pulling so much from stage here of like, it's farce, it's just like, that door opens, that guy's there, that door closes. Well, he's not there anymore. You must be seeing things.
A lot of the sort of written gags, especially around the two girls thing, like definitely just feels like it was pulled from their stage show. Like there's the whole bit about where Abbott is like, now what if you had a third girlfriend? Let's call her Mary. And like, you'd have too many. And so why don't you give me one of them and I'll offload it? And
sure,
he's like,
you can have Mary.
Yeah, you can have Mary. Like that's like, I'm sure that wasn't written for this movie. Like a lot of that stuff was like, I'm sure part of their act. But there's a lot of good physical comedy here. The part where like they barricade the door and it opens the other way. Probably a classic bit, but like it works.
Still great. Obviously hits. Now you have to set it up slightly differently, but like I think about like still one of the biggest laughs in The Big Lebowski for me, especially since so much of the humor of that movie is like so rapid fire and so like, like trying to operate on like the fifth level of a joke. And then just to do it, the simple gag sometimes just kills. there's a thing that I want to talk about in the way they execute some of the horror type monster movie elements. It's certainly clearly like not a horror movie, right? Like it, but it's a monster movie, and because it's a comedy, they get to do things differently than they would in regular Dracula, like in like a regular monster movie. In the 31 Dracula, the bat transformation is handled. It looks terrible. Like they have this really bad bat on wires. It's one of the parts of the movie that ages the least. The way that they represent Dracula's transformation to and from being a bat in this movie is to do a brief hand-drawn animation.
Yeah.
And it looks so cool.
They rock.
You could not get away with that in a movie where you're supposed to have a different layer of suspension of disbelief. But it is so cool looking and effective. It made me want to be like, no, you should rewrite the conventions of film so that that's allowed.
It looks so good. I couldn't agree more. It's also like, this is my thing with like horror comedy always is when you treat the horror seriously, which this movie does.
For the most part,
they treat Dracula as like a genuine threat.
Yeah.
You know, and like the Wolfman is like going through it in this movie. That is like, that's like an Oscar-worthy performance he's giving as the Wolfman. He's like,
no one looks sadder
really
than Lon Chaney Jr.
Lon Chaney
is
puts
all played so real that then it's funny when they're being goofy, and they're genuinely scared. It's never like pointing at it and being like, "That's fucking stupid," you know. Like it happens in so many horror comedies, but the horror is so real because it's like that's actually Bela Lugosi, you know.
Well, and that's such a good point that like. Yeah, that they're never laughing at the monsters. Abbott and Costello are terrified of like what's going on, and that is a subtle but like powerful thing about it. To just sort of go back to summarizing the plot because we keep getting soundtrack or sidetracked.
I mean, it's supposed to be
we're all, but like the basic plot here is that Dracula, I guess, has found Frankenstein's monster, but he's busted up and needs a new brain. And so he doesn't want to make the mistake that Dr. Frankenstein made. He wants a brain that is pliable and weak, that will follow his every order. And so Lenore, or Sandra, who is Dracula's like servant doctor person, she's like, don't worry, I found the stupidest brain possible for you. And of course it's Lou Costello, and that's why she's dating him, is because she is trying to lure him to Dracula so Dracula can put Costello's brain in Frankenstein's monster's head. Frankenstein's monster is like mobile in this though.
The brain is like too unstable. Like we finally get that paid off at the end of the movie where Dr. Sandra tells Frankenstein to stop, and then he does, and he just picks her up and throws her somewhere.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So up to that point, I did also have the question watching me like, this Frankenstein seems pretty willing to follow Dracula's orders. I don't see what the problem is.
Yeah.
Of course, like if in a comedy, those kinds of
it doesn't matter.
The joke is it's funnier if it's Costello's brain.
Yeah.
So
yeah, the setup is just so good because I noticed that I never noticed that as a kid, but I did notice it this time. I was like, what's wrong? What's not working here with Frankenstein Dracula? You know, like it does feel like they're using a little bit the like. You remember that in like the 31 Frankenstein, right? The first one where all the stuff about like, wow, we put a criminal brain, which in 1931 is our understanding of biology is that there's two types of brains. Like, oops, we put the wrong that by the Bride of Frankenstein, they'd been like, all right, forget the criminal brain stuff. That's not we read more books. That doesn't exist anymore. That like it feels like they're still sort of just like using the criminal brain idea from 31 maybe. That was my like read on it.
But now they've moved on to baby brain.
They want a baby brain, and then rather than getting an actual 9-year-old boy's brain, which might not fit very comfortably in the skull,
it would rattle
they're
around.
They're going to get the Costello brain
because little kids' brains grow. They want a big smooth brain, and that's Lou.
And you know what? Like that bit is like. The fact that he can never like disagree with their logic at any point. Like that's another thing where like they're all buying into the premise of the horror, but also like when they're like, oh yeah, we want this stupid brain. He's like, yeah, that makes sense. And like, and like they say that he's just so compliant. And like, he might like pose a little objection. And then the beautiful woman will tell him something like, no, you know, this is how it's going to work. Be like, yeah, okay.
And also Dracula sees it right away. Like Dracula meets him and is immediately like, I approve, Sandra. Like, I can tell this man is dumb as hell.
It's so, I don't know to spoil anything, but when I was watching Killers of the Flower Moon recently, and I couldn't help but think of this with Leo's character a little. I was like, oh yeah, he's got a Lou Costello. He just, no matter what you tell him, that's what reality is for that guy. That real man who existed in reality. What a fucking idiot.
I've been referring to that as Leo's Joaquin Phoenix performance because it reminds me of like Joaquin Phoenix playing characters in like The Master or Joker who feel like they're written for people 30 years younger. But now I think I'm going to think of all of those in the umbrella of fucking Lou Costello characters.
I've always said Joaquin Phoenix is the modern Lou Costello. And
I don't want to give anything away for what I'm about to say in the back.
I don't want to spoil your pitch.
So we also have a couple other characters that are thrown in, but the only one that really matters is that we have Jane Randolph as Joan Raymond. Jane Randolph, who is also one of the stars of Cat People, which is going to come up later on in our season. She plays the second person who is pretending to be in love with Costello's character. But she also has an ulterior motive. She is an insurance investigator who is trying to find out what happened to the two crates with the valuable bodies in them. So
such a weird little twist to have just insurance fraud thrown into the middle of your monster movie.
It almost feels like the like originally Abbott and Costello like didn't like the script here. They're like, all right, if we're gonna do it, we got some notes, and Lou Costello's notes were, I need two beautiful romantic interests. And Bud Abbott's note, like his writer was like, okay, those interests have to be lying to him.
Yeah.
That's the only way I'll do the movie is if he's humiliated.
Perfect compromise.
So there's a costume ball involved. So they get to do a bit where, we haven't introduced the Wolfman here. So the other sort of party here is that Larry Talbot, the Wolfman, calls from London, where he's hanging out in the version of the Wolfman movie where he doesn't die at the end, and calls them and warns Costello about the danger. But of course, they don't understand, like, it goes over their head, the whole idea that Dracula and Frankenstein are real. And then he flies over to join them, and I guess they never say what American city, right? But joins them there and kind of keeps trying to give them information that they need to solve the problem. But because it's a full moon, he can't save the day. It's
a full moon for like 3 nights straight.
Yeah, but that's how full moons work, Dalton.
We could play fast and loose with full moons.
In werewolf stories, often that's part you get to do the beginning and middle and end. You have the 3 nights of the full moon.
Oh, do they do all? Okay,
very frequently.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just getting everything wrong today. That's fine.
You're going to leave it all in the show.
I was wrong. Of all the Universal monsters, werewolf stuff is like, that's way down the list for me on like what I know about. I also noticed that on the rewatch. I didn't know that was the 3 nights. Makes sense.
Dylan wrote our werewolf movies, so I guess I need to do more research.
You're doing the next werewolf movie,
one.
So you better get on your lunar calendar shit.
Yeah, I'm missing my basics.
So basically, you have Larry Talbot as sort of like the advisor, like the person who has the genre savvy and knows what's up, but he is hampered by his lycanthropy, and that also leads to a bunch of gags where they keep mistaking him for a guy in a mask, or they keep seeing like his hotel room's messed up. It's like, man, he went on a real bender. Like they're supposed to lock him in his hotel room, but they don't really buy the explanation as to why. So they keep unlocking the door, going in there, narrowly avoid getting killed.
Classic.
Good fun.
And there's a whole bit where Abbott has a wolf mask at the masquerade ball. And so then when the Wolfman attacks someone, everyone thinks it's Abbott. And so the police are looking for him. Classic madcap shit.
Yeah, there's not like a lot of plot. It's mostly a vehicle for some madcap fun and hijinks.
Yeah, not as much to recap here, but do we have any final thoughts about the film before we take a break and get into the pitch? Because I think we're all anxious to hear what you've got in mind. But anything else anyone wants to say about the film?
Just that the final gag with the Invisible Man rocks.
Mm-hmm.
It's so
good.
It is the exact right, like that is the platonically best way to end this movie.
Yes.
As a kid, I liked it, and then rewatching it now, I was like, hats off to him. That rocks.
It's such a good final bit. Basically, Abbott and Costello have gotten away on this boat, and they're like, thank God there's no more monsters. And then suddenly a cigarette floats in the air and lights itself, and Vincent Price announces himself as the Invisible Man, and they scream and they jump into the water. And it's...
end of film. See you in the next one.
Yeah, a perfect little stinger for it. What Universal monsters aren't included here? We don't have a Bride of Frankenstein. The creature didn't exist yet.
Yeah, so fair's fair.
No mummy.
There is the Invisible Man.
Yeah, no mummy.
So there's like odd, like off case one. It's like what's his name? Not Bella. Boris Karloff's character in like the old Dark House, isn't it?
Sure. Yeah.
The like
we don't.
Somebody pointed out that he's like a primordial. What's his name? Torgo from Manos: The Hands of Fate. He is like a lot like him.
Yeah.
They do an Abbott Costello Meet Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde after this.
Oh, that's
which is
the Mummy. There's no mummy in this.
There's no mummy.
No Phantom of the Opera.
No Hunchback of Notre Dame.
What a shame.
They should have done an Abbott and Costello Meet the Hunchback of Notre Dame, and let it be.
I think
musical.
that's it. Yeah, and like just do it. Just do the full Hunchback of Notre Dame, and also like two morons.
Yeah, like how they added those two gargoyles in the Disney version. There you go.
Abbott and Costello.
Oh my God, that would have been way better.
That's perfect.
All right, so I guess we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to hear Branson Reese's idea as to how to reimagine an Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein style film in the Dark Universe. We'll be right back.
In 2006, DC Comics attempted a publishing stunt like nothing comics had ever seen before.
1 year-long continuous story.
For 52 weekly issues.
By a writer's room of the hottest comic writers in the industry.
What they created was the most important comic book series of the 21st century. I'm Gita Jackson.
And I'm professional comic book expert Alex Jaffe.
And we're the hosts of 52 Pickup, a deep dive into 52, the comic book that took the conventions of television writing to comics and defined the way we think about superhero universes today.
We'll show you just how big the DC universe can be when you get Batman out of the way.
And the chain of dominoes that led to Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson playing Black Adam in a major Hollywood movie.
Find 52 Pickup wherever you find your podcasts, and we'll go issue by issue into this starting point to our comic book obsessions and figure out why our brains are broken this way.
It's the greatest podcast you've never heard of.
Are you ready?
We are back here in the Dark Universe with Branson Reese. We've been talking about Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.
It's time to finally answer everyone's burning question.
It's the most speculated on recasting that we've ever had in our universe.
So I gotta say, I feel the double-edged sword here of like, at first I was like, I can't believe nobody took Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. What the? I mean, no offense, but your guests are morons. Like it's one of the best ones. If Bride of Frankenstein's taken, well, you got to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then it sunk into me. Eventually, I was like, oh, you know what? They got a fan base. I know fan bases. They talk to each other. They theorize. I'm about to step in it. No matter what, there are people who've had months and they've got peer review. I mean, I would love to know. I just want listeners to know. I'm coming into this fresh.
You
probably have a better...
Our listeners are like really cool.
They're very accepting. We have taken some wild swings and people are always psyched about what we do. So I really don't think there's any wrong answer here. Once we get to the level where like our fans are getting pissed at us, I don't know. We're gonna have to shut something down. I don't want to be at that level, but so far everyone is very nice, and
that's called the pay and rent level.
Yes,
once
exactly.
you get there, that's when
that's the real double-edged sword.
Yeah, that's the thing is that we would love to be paying our rent with the show, but then a lot of more people who suck would probably have to be listening. Yeah. Right now, it's almost the people who talk to us exclusively cool people.
Only cool people.
All right,
you know what I should say? My fans also they're very cool about stuff like this, but you know what I mean. All it takes is one guy being like, "Hey, you said something. I'm gonna kill you now." You know, and you start showing belly anytime you have an idea.
Over Abbott
so
and Costello,
just know that going in.
People have waited for 45 minutes. They got to know.
So I was thinking about, and it's as we said, it's like the plot of this isn't super important, right? It's like the character name we couldn't even remember. Like, we watched them today. It's like Chick and Wilbur. Shut up. No, it's Abbott and Costello. Like, so obviously we are casting characters for this who know each other and have like a pre-established relationship. I thought of a few going into it. I was like, realistically, if this was made right now, I think they'd probably go with something sort of hot and buzzy, some sort of younger actors. It might be Rachel and Io from like Bottoms.
That would be fun. My idea was Rachel and Io. Yeah,
I think that's a great choice. I almost went with it sincerely.
Yeah,
and I actually think that would be like and they're very funny and they would be very good.
Sure.
The problem with that is in Rachel and Io, who's the Lou Costello? Who's the Bud Abbott either? They're very funny, but they're not. Neither
totally
of them are
different
like
dynamic
in the characters that they play.
Well, and also we were talking about like, I don't think anyone writes for Rachel and Io like Rachel and Io. So like in this kind of format where it's like a pitch thing, it'd be so hard to pitch a Rachel and Io movie, I feel
Although easier than if we were going to do it in the style of a canon, like mainline episode where we actually have to write the script.
Right, yeah.
That was the big thing where it's like, another one of the most popular ones that has come up, and apologies if this is going to be your pick, the biggest one that gets brought up in the conversations is Key and Peele.
I considered them for sure.
But then the whole thing is just like either me or Dalton being like, neither of us can write a Key and Peele movie.
Neither of us can script a Key and Peele thing.
And of course, it's
gonna focus on like the Black experience in a way that's like,
right.
Yeah. Hey, you want me writing that? I don't want me writing that. Nobody wants me writing that.
The personas are also so specific and also in a way that is, like they play types of characters on their sketch show.
That would be really interesting though, considering Peele's horror chops, to see like what they did with a horror comedy crossover thing for them. But we're getting a feel.
I actually think Peele would be a great director.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
But that said, I considered them and I didn't go with them. I considered briefly, and I actually really liked the idea because they do stuff together, The Rock and Kevin Hart.
Yes.
They've got a good chemistry. I know they're not like the coolest comedy duo, but like those box office don't lie, like
absolutely.
They're doing something right. And honestly, I gotta say, I'm like all into this like alt world and everything, of like, very ironic stuff. I watch interviews with them. They are like, Kevin Hart's a funny guy. You don't need to get ahead of it. Like he's a very funny person. So I considered that. And I ultimately, I was like, you know what we need though? We need two guys who don't have chemistry. We need two guys who are funny.
Yeah.
But really what's going on is, one is dumb and one is mean. And so once I got into that I just want you to know what I went through to get to this place. Then I was like, oh, who they used to do stuff together more often. It could have like a little, I don't think they do it now, but like maybe in the aughts, if Arrested Development never happened, Bob and David could do this in a fun way.
Yeah.
I actually think there's sort of a case of either could be Bud Abbott.
Sure.
I think, but I don't think now it would work in the same way. And then I thought Ben Stiller and Jack Black.
Jack Black came to mind while I was watching this as terms of the Costello effect. Like, who has this energy now? And Jack Black's the first person that came to mind.
Yeah, that manic cartoon energy.
And I thought, and then the more I thought about it, the more I was like, you know what, though? We don't need to recreate Abbott and Costello. Because inevitably what we're going to get is somebody being annoying, doing it incorrect. Lou Costello, to his credit, I wasn't annoyed with him. I was disgusted by him in the movie, but I wasn't annoyed with him. And I think it's really tough to, the Three Stooges movie notwithstanding, which I think is good. That's where I stand on that. Like, it's very tough to recreate an old comics whole deal. And so I want to go in a different direction. And so where I landed on it is I landed on Pete Davidson. Okay. I think that would realistically Pete Davidson in the Lou Costello role. And I thought, who is the last person who should be with him? And I was like, oh, it's so obvious to me now. Larry David.
Oh,
the movie. It's Larry David and Pete Davidson. Those guys you never see walking around. And I think Pete Davidson like dated his daughter, or maybe is still dating his daughter. That,
and if he hasn't, then he will.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, here that is one nobody would have nobody else would have thought of.
But Larry David as Bud Abbott is really ingenious. Like that, I can immediately see that dynamic. And replacing, like, Lou Costello in the 40s is doing his baby shtick because that was like peak comedy, like the swooning over a girl and like, but now having it be like the stoner slacker sex guy is like the modern kind of version of that. So I can see like that is like a parallel to their dynamic in a very good way.
I also like that you've picked an idea for your Abbott, for your straight man, who is very specific in a way that Abbott is not.
Yes, we had to fix that.
Yeah, so you talked about Abbott being the extremely mechanical straight man. This is a situation where he is Larry David's persona is that he is a blank wall in the sense that he is immovable from his position on something. And that makes him really fun. When someone's bouncing off of him, he's not going to budge, but he's going to hold a position that is weird. That is like that he will assume is everyone's position.
And will always feel natural being in opposition to Pete Davidson.
And I also think the more I thought about it, the more I was like, this is insane, but I think this is my this got to be my choice because Larry David also has this thing he does where every once in a while he'll be an incredibly good sport about something. He's just for out of nowhere, he's like egalitarian in turn. He's like, if you don't upset him, he's like, well, he's not a bad guy, like he'll be fair. And I think that gives us some narrative.
Yeah.
It just gives us a little bit of space and narrative for like, okay, I can see why he would go along with this. I can see why he would care about this instead of just being like, this is crazy, I'm out of here. I can see why he might meet these monsters halfway. Now, beyond that, this is where I start to get into territory where I actually should have run stuff by you, but this is where it gets really loosey-goosey. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought, okay, Universal, right?
Sure.
We have access. I was thinking it was like in 1948, they are using these famous monsters. They're putting these famous vaudeville comedians together with these famous monsters. Can't miss. In 2023, though, there's a possibility they wouldn't even touch Dracula and Frankenstein.
Sure. I like where you're going with this.
They might pull from other, Universal horror. And so I was like, oh, the more I thought about it, I was like, maybe this is, I know they have Tales from the Crypt. This could be, the Crypt Keeper could be introducing this movie. You know what I mean? Like they have it at their disposal. We could welcome the Crypt Keeper into the Universal family here. Now, if I'm breaking rules, please let me know, because
you're not. I really like where you're going. I do believe the Crypt Keeper is owned by Warner Brothers.
Oh, he is?
The thing is,
well, then forget it.
The Tales from the Crypt movies, the Demon Knight is a Universal
Yes, that's what
picture.
I was thinking.
Demon Knight is a Universal picture, but the series was HBO.
Yeah, so he's in that King Kong territory where we could cheat and get away with it.
And if it's critical to your pitch, I think we could cheat and say
the idea.
I would much rather play by your rules.
The idea of picking a lot of more not the mainline movie monsters from Universal is very much in keeping with what we do here, especially since Dalton and I have been kind of monopolizing those characters in the main line of our narrative, which means
that's
a lot of the other ones are
that
available.
Leaves open a few other things I had in mind, such as The Purge.
Yes.
I know The Purge is Universal property. I would love to see these two get purged. That might just be the entire movie. That's our Abbott and Costello.
Yeah.
Like these two. Maybe it's a situation now where we are. Now, I got a lot of ideas here with this, where he is dating his daughter. He's dating his daughter. They get stuck outside during the Purge. They have to come together and bond while society is decaying around them. Meanwhile, Larry David, the entire time, he's got opportunities to kill Pete Davidson. He's going to be taking them and missing them in farcical ways. He's going to be shooting at him and he just misses. And it turns out he shoots one of the people who was charging at them. Close one. Pete Davidson turns and thanks him. That's one of the other that is sitting right there that I don't know if you guys have touched this is Chucky.
Yes.
We've been orbiting Chucky and talking about it, but he hasn't fit into what we're doing in our grander design right now. So Chucky is available.
So is, on that note, Megan.
We've been talking about, like, I don't think we've ever actually talked about it on the show. We talked about Chucky versus Megan and the way that it's inevitable to become a real movie, and we kind of want to scoop them because our production cycle is somewhat shorter.
Here's I don't know if this goes against some of your other ideas you have, but as you're talking, the sort of title that has been popping into my head is Larry and Pete Enter the Blumhouse, because Blumhouse is owned by Universal.
I love this.
And it's just a collection of, I mean, he could meet fucking Michael Myers. We could do an Exorcist bit. We could have Megan. We could have the Five Nights at Freddy's guys. Who are some other?
It's high time Five Nights at Freddy's was in a movie.
Yes. I think The Purge is Blumhouse, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So like Purge fits in perfectly. So it could be like Blumhouse scary movie, but with Larry and Pete.
It needs to be Pete and Larry. Larry and Pete sounds like shit, Dalton.
Yeah, Pete and Larry.
Pete and Larry sounds really good too.
I now pronounce you Pete and Larry.
I now pronounce you Chuck and Larry.
Pete and Larry. Yeah, that's why it sounds good. Yeah, but
Davidson and David.
Oh yeah,
then it has to be David and Davidson.
That's
David and Davidson.
Fun.
Yeah, that is good.
I love this. I love them entering the Blum, and I think that's it. Maybe it starts with The Purge.
Yeah,
it starts with The Purge, and they're like, all right, let's hide in here. Let's hide in this. Oh, it's the Insidious house.
Yes.
That's where we're hiding from the Purge. Oh, fuck, we got to get out of here. That to me, that's very fun. And then, so maybe it's like our Invisible Man twist at the very end of this movie. That's Chucky and Megan.
Sure. Yes. Yeah. Like them, and they're dating now or something. Just
it seems only fair. Yeah, they would.
Which I don't know where the bride of Chucky has ended up. Maybe they're poly. It's fine. That maybe that's the bit, is that Chucky's poly now.
I think he is. I actually think that's not even a bit. I think that's like an actual.
Is that canon? I haven't watched the new series.
Chucky mythos right now.
Good for them.
So I know they're like playing with Chucky's sexuality, and we here at Branson Reese take our hats off to them. Hell yeah.
All right, so this is one film that we're talking about where it's David and Davidson enter the Blumhouse, and that is, we're not imagining this as like a series of films where we do these individual David and Davidson meet Chucky, David and Davidson meet or go through The Purge or whatever.
I'm bringing up a list of Blumhouse movies just to see who we're dealing with.
I actually think a series would be pretty. It's like, why spend it? Why go Space Jam 2 when you can focus in on a concept? I actually think keeping it at the. I'm really into this Purge idea now.
That's my favorite.
Purge. That's a very fun angle to me on it, because a lot of the Purge movies almost do it. I love those movies. They really have something to say about America, and I'm listening. It's like I'd love to see these two mismatched guys just narrowly avoid killing each other.
Yes, that's
82 minutes.
I love the idea, of Larry David trying to kill Pete and just constantly fucking up. That's a fun dynamic.
Now, where we do run into trouble is that because the Purge is a very, this is a movie that would be a fun thing to slide into, the Purge universe in a funny way. But what makes it difficult for us in terms of our story is there's no way for us to reconcile the Purge as a concept with our universe as we built it. So this might have to be a non-canonical movie within the shingle that I've been calling Dumbhouse Productions.
Yes, where we do our side things. But
part of the challenge with this, as it was with Gita's pitch, was to try and figure out if there's a way that we can make it compatible with our.
I will say, in the first Purge, which is not the first Purge movie, but the sequel called The First Purge, the Purge is localized to a single city.
Right.
So it doesn't have to be a nationwide Purge. This could be a more localized Purge.
Be a test case. Even that takes place after the new founding fathers have taken over America, right? So there's been a political revolution that we kind of can't account for in our world, but that's not to say they couldn't have run this kind of social experiment or in our universe, because we don't have to incorporate the Purge movies into ours. We just have to have a Purge happen.
That gives me an idea. What if this is set before any Purge movies? this is the absolute first purge, and they do a 2-man purge just to test it out. This is just a run.
No, that's
like
so
a dry
good.
run of the purge. It's like, let's put 2 guys alone in a room and tell them no laws and see what happens.
Not even, it doesn't even have to be a room, but like, hey, for these 24 hours where you two are not bound by any laws, and it can be, so they can still go throughout the city, and it's just like, oh, if you see those 2 guys trying to kill each other, just let them go at it. Like,
well,
nobody
here's my pitch. I love this. So they start in a room.
Okay.
And they're told there's no laws in this room. You guys can do anything. Larry David immediately is going to go try to kill Pete Davidson. Pete Davidson, through some sort of being high, that's the, his equivalent of being dumb, like Lou Costello.
Yeah.
He accidentally escapes the room. They both leave. Nobody told them that it's only the room.
Okay.
They believe now that they are in a full purge. And so they are living without consequence. Meanwhile, these guys are like, fuck.
They've escaped
we're on the
containment.
hook for this. So they've got to hunt them down. And so now it's like a cat and mouse game where the mouse doesn't know that it's a cat and mouse game. So they're just running around willy-nilly committing purge crimes.
Okay.
Love that.
That could be fun in terms of it's a way that it could work in our dark universe and also potentially be a prequel to the first Purge.
This way the Purge stuff, it keeps it clean, it keeps it pristine and relatively untouched. Meanwhile, they can now, as things escalate, they can, believing now that they are like free from any laws, they can meet Megan. They can meet Chucky. They can meet these Blumhouse. I'm trying to remember what is
see who else we're
Blumhouse
working
and what
with.
isn't now. They can meet the Five Nights at Freddy's guys.
Insidious is Blumhouse. The Paranormal Activity movies are Blumhouse. We've got, I'm just looking at for like the big ones. Unfriended. The Unfriended series. Sinister.
Wow, they can meet Unfriended.
Yeah, there's just like a weird digression in the movie where it becomes a screen time film.
Yeah. I do think, though, that can sort of be like they are under the mistaken belief. They mistakenly believe that this is happening for everyone, too.
Yes. Oh. Okay. They think everyone else is in the Purge.
Is in the Purge.
Happy Death Day. I don't know how we could get that to Get Out is a Blumhouse movie.
I think it's like what's helpful for Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein is they meet Frankenstein. They meet monsters. They meet like a figure.
That's the thing.
And I think this is a good framing device for them. But then I would like for them to meet Michael Myers.
Yes, we got to get Michael Myers. And it seems like Megan. I'm trying to see if there's any other like classic characters.
I think Ethan Hawke's character, the grabber in the black phone.
I just saw the black phone. Yeah,
we could
grabber
do a bit
would be great.
about Pete Davidson being just like comparably so young that to Larry David he would be comparably a child,
or that Pete Davidson's girlfriend has been taken by the grabber. Maybe
Pete Davidson's what?
If Pete Davidson is dating Larry David's daughter, and let's say she is younger than Pete Davidson, but still of legal age, and she gets taken by the grabber, and now they have to team up. They have to stop trying to kill each other to get Pete Davidson's girlfriend and Larry David's daughter back from the black phone basement.
I'm worried about the number of
kids, right?
Yeah.
That's okay. That is an unfortunate wrinkle in his whole deal.
I'm worried about how many hats we've piled onto our heads right now.
I think, you know what? Let's keep it simple. Keep it simple. I think he just abducts them. And maybe he's branching out. Maybe, he's just like, usually I take kids.
I'm grabbing adults.
I mean, I like the idea that maybe because of how Pete Davidson dresses, or maybe how young people dress like Pete Davidson, that he could mistake Pete for a kid.
I like that.
Also,
I just like the idea of like, because that to me is them like, we're treating it real. Like, and there's no joke there. That's just like an actual like serial killer, that is, and the threat of him is actually real. And then the joke is these two guys like can't agree with each other while this fucking guy is about to like cut their heads off or whatever. I don't remember what he does in Black Phone.
He just he chains them up and then does he beat them to death? I don't remember either.
So point of clarification.
Yeah, it's bad.
Yeah,
he puts them in a soundproof basement. Nothing good's going to happen.
No.
Yeah, I think putting them in a soundproof basement is very funny.
Are Larry David and Pete Davidson playing characters, or are we doing a This Is the End type thing where they are playing Larry David and Pete Davidson?
Oh, I think they're playing characters. I think to keep it true to the spirit, they're playing very thin characters.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Just loose stand-ins for their own sort of vibes.
Yeah.
They can
Larry
even be Wilbur
is playing
and
essentially like a George Costanza type, where it's like written based on him. And Pete is playing whatever character he plays in every movie that isn't named Pete Davidson.
He's
not even to take anything from him. That's a lot of movie stars do that, but that's what he's doing here.
Yeah,
that's so much to wrap our heads around because we've created a crossover movie. Again, this is in the spirit of the source material that we're dealing with here.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've created a massive crossover movie within our crossover universe that incorporates a ton of stuff that has not yet been introduced into the Dark Universe.
So what I would like to hammer out before we call this pitch good, I want to nail down a few details.
Sure.
First, this is a film or this is an anthology series? It seems like we're leaning towards film. But maybe a film that could be a franchise.
To sequels.
Yes, we can be open to sequels. Yeah. It seems like, are we sticking with David and Davidson Enter the Blumhouse? Is that the title, or do we want to workshop that?
So the more I think about it, the more I think this should be. I think this should be David and Davidson Meet the Grabber.
Oh, okay.
To really keep it there, they meet the grabber. And then now, if they meet the grabber, they're abducted by the grabber, right? Like, this starts with the purge thing. Maybe we drop the I don't know. Maybe we don't even hold on to the purge.
David and Davidson get purged.
Oh, yeah, they get purged. So they meet the grabber. And then I think the grabber can also have, they can discover that also kidnapped by the grabber, because he does take kids, remember, is Chucky and Megan.
Yeah, I like that.
And that's how we get
Chucky
and Megan in there.
Yeah.
And now we've got the sort of the gumbo of monsters that we have from Abbott Costello Meet Frankenstein.
Then I don't think we need the purge thing anymore.
But I think it's vestigial. I think you're right.
I really love the idea of the two of them getting purged.
Yeah, but that's a whole movie by itself. You don't need any of the other Blumhouse stuff for that to work. That's its own movie.
But I think that's the next one. That's the sequel, is they get purged.
Okay, so it's Meet the Grabber. Which I like that, because the grabber is not like a huge monster star, but we're putting him in the title.
Like the big note we'll be getting from the studio is like, can you call it like David and Davidson Pick Up the Black Phone or something?
Yeah,
it's like, no, we're calling it Meet the Grabber.
Meet the Grabber. And then the second one is David and Davidson Get Purged. Okay, so now we are planning a franchise here.
But the idea that the grabber one is also our Chucky and Megan movie.
Well, and I like that it ends up kind of being Chucky and Megan versus the grabber, with them just sort of caught in the middle of it, right? Because it's kind of like how the Wolfman is going up against Frankenstein and Dracula, and, Abbott and Costello are just sort of like in the middle of something they didn't ask to be a part of.
Exactly.
And it's kind of the same thing, where we've got these three ruthless killers going at it. Meanwhile, Pete is high off his ass, and like Larry's like, it's so dirty in here. Why isn't anyone cleaned? I understand we're being kidnapped, but can someone get a mop down here, please? Like doing that kind of shtick is good.
And I think the final joke at the end too is they're like, oh, fine, we got out of here. Chucky and Megan have teamed up and they've killed the grabber, an equal monster to them in the Universal. That's a close one. At least now we're okay. And then right behind them is the 2021 Candyman.
Oh, that'll do it.
And that's the end of the movie.
Or Michael Myers. We could do.
Well, wait, hang on. Well, we have the whole thing, but Universal and Blumhouse no longer have Michael Myers.
Okay, that's fair.
The clock has run out on.
Do we have Candyman?
Yeah,
is that Universal?
I don't know that Universal has Candyman. I don't know that Blumhouse has Candyman. But we can fudge
either
that.
way, we can fudge that. That's fine.
Yes. So I love it.
I think 2021 Candyman. I don't think they have the 93 Candyman though.
Yeah.
Or 92. Sorry, everyone.
But
how dare you?
Yeah, Candyman being there, that's a good stinger. Or I was thinking like they as soon as they get out, they like go to get dinner somewhere, and the only place that's open is the Five Nights at Freddy's restaurant or something.
Oh, that's even better. That's very good.
The Candyman.
Why don't we eat at this abandoned children's like Chuck E. Cheese place?
The Candyman thing though opens the doors to potentially like a direct sequel which would be particularly funny considering that like Candyman is so like has so much to do with like race, and Pete Davidson and Larry David are two guys who would fuck that up in really funny ways. And then we get to bring DB Smoove into the mix as well. Because we need to have Larry David's like the guy who Larry David has around to explain black people things to him.
But not Jeff Garlin. We're not.
No, we're gonna add in a CGI Jeff Garlin.
He's fine, but we add in a CGI Jeff Garlin.
What about this? I feel like the vibe I'm getting from this isn't so much movie franchise, but like hour-long specials, like streaming specials.
I think that's probably how these would realistically be released.
And we do like, maybe one a year, one every 2 years, where it's like a 50-minute, 1 hour David and Davidson Peacock exclusive, comes out around Halloween, right?
Because we haven't been doing a lot of the streaming material stuff, though, although that's kind of the idea behind Dark Universe Holiday Special, which will be the episode that comes out after this.
It seems like, phase 3, like we are starting to do more like streaming exclusive stuff, especially because, we're in that era of like Marvel where they're starting to do the Disney Plus series and stuff.
Yeah, and we haven't learned anything.
Yeah, so if we're doing the holiday special, I think it also makes sense every year around Halloween, we do a David and Davidson special. And the first one is Meet the Grabber. That also makes sense. I feel like Meet the Grabber is something we can sell to the execs as a streaming thing more than a blockbuster, Yeah. So we do Meet the Grabber. We do Get Purged, Meet the Candyman.
This is also a great way for us to kind of push back against, obviously that era is over because you basically can't get a studio comedy made. And but like there's that period of time where like, oh yeah, now we've got our like 2 hour, 15-minute Judd Apatow comedies. Like, no, we don't need 80 minutes. Yes. That's it.
Keep these things
and
short.
Even 80 minutes sometimes is more than you need. Those things don't need to be that long. I like this a lot as streaming. I think is like really, it's just real. It's what they would actually do.
Yes.
Right. Because when I first thought of this, my absolute first thought would be, it would be Abbott and Costello Meet the Terrifier. But that's not universal. But you know what I mean? It would be that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, like, eventually, if Comcast buys Shudder, then they would be doing
everything.
That. We would need to have those like crazy French extremity.
Where we eventually go? David and Davidson Meet Ma.
Oh yeah,
we gotta have them over to Ma's house. I thought you were going to say like
Snuff or something. I was like, whoa.
No, we gotta get them over to Ma's house. Ma is an iconic Blumhouse villain. I
like it. I mean, these are all on the docket for me. Yeah, they meet Ma.
We do this as long as Larry David wants to keep getting up and doing them. And based on how long he's been doing Curb Your Enthusiasm, he's gonna go until he physically can't do it.
Yeah. I think we've created a franchise here. We've created a yearly tradition for Peacock in the Dark Universe. I think eventually we could get some of our Dark Legion monsters involved if we wanted to, maybe a couple years down the line after it's established.
But the fact that it doesn't feel like it needs them. Like,
no,
it didn't feel like we were working too hard. Apart from like the how are we going to do the purge thing, which we kind of worked out. Although I don't think we have to be too precious about it.
No, not at all.
Like it didn't feel like we were bending over backwards to avoid using characters we've already used. There's so much that's available in this playground.
Yeah, and this is our first window into adapting more of these modern Universal characters, and I think this is a really great way to do it by doing it in this comedic streaming format. So
and since it's on the streaming channel, we can always do what Disney did with their what Marvel did with their first batch of streaming shows, and if it conflicts with what we want to do later, we'll just say it was never canon.
It's that episode wasn't canon.
Like that's true of the original film too. Because it's like this is set in the world where like I guess the Wolfman just didn't die.
And same with Dracula.
This is just what he did right after.
Just, here they are.
Yeah. Any other ideas you had for the pitch that you want to bring up?
Those were the big ones. I just, now that once we talked about it, the animation, it's like, let's get a little bit of animation in there.
Love that.
That little animated moment where he turns into the bat. I think a nice animated opening credits.
I was just going to say, just like the Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, having an animated opening credits with like animated Pete and Larry would be very good.
I think, and you got to honor what's actually happening, not what you want to be happening. It's like, I would love for it to be in all these different styles, but like, what are we actually watching now? Like, what? Yeah. And it would be like that sort of like Fox primetime, or maybe like that like Rick and Morty style of the two of them walking around. That's just what it would be, you know.
You wouldn't even have to adapt the models from Rick and Morty that much to make it Larry David and Pete Davidson.
You just stretch out Morty.
And of course, we'll have a Swan Boy cameo in there somewhere.
Of course.
Thank
you. That's
yes.
I was gonna pitch it.
And we got to line your pockets,
I would rather
too.
sneak it in there after the pitch.
Yeah, give you a little taste of that licensing money, you know.
Just that would change my life. Nobody involved in any of this that would mean anything to them. It would change my life if Swan Boy popped up at one point. I could go on vacation with that money.
Yeah. I mean, once we get the go-ahead from Universal to make all of these projects, we'll make sure all of our guests are compensated handsomely.
We're also gonna write. We're gonna write into the script of the first David and Davidson one that the opening shot of the movie after the animated sequence is Pete Davidson getting a Swan Boy tattoo.
Oh, there we go.
That's like that could be the opening credits are like different tattoos on him.
Oh my, yeah, that's the animation. Yeah.
Dig it.
Oh man, and we will make
everyone's like running around. It's them running like from one door to another.
Oh yes, Scooby-Doo
in between
style.
Like his
and
like collarbones.
Yes,
Abbott and Costello Meets Frankenstein. One of the things I kept thinking is that this is such a direct ancestor to Scooby-Doo that feels like an appropriate homage to make.
I think so. Yeah. And then you could do it in the style, and this isn't that anachronistic. You could do it in the style of those like old Cartoon Network bumpers, you know, where they have like the original models, but then it's like the real background, you know, that's how you like fade into reality.
Love it. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And we will make sure that Pete Davidson actually gets a Swan Boy tattoo as well, because I think,
bet he would.
Yeah.
People rag on him all the time. I sort of like him. I think he's chill. He seems like a okay guy.
Now, I remember the first time I was seeing him on, he's just overexposed now is the thing. It's like when he was when he's the new guy, like showing up doing bits on Weekend Update, and be like, hey, this is fresh. This feels good. And it's just a matter of, you know, his personal life became too much of a part of the product. And
I liked him in Bodies.
Yeah.
Yeah. When he's just like sort of doing his thing, like the thing that he is famous for, it's like, yeah, I get it. I get it. That's a charismatic guy. I get why he's famous.
Yeah, it's the cycle that like I think every breakout from SNL has gone through, where it's like, oh, this is the hot new thing. I like this. Like, okay, now it's their show, and I'm a little exhausted. Now they're a celebrity. Now they're a movie star, and then for the best of them, kind of come back around to being like, oh no, I like their bit. That's cool.
I felt this way watching. It's probably like a decade ago now. I watched Johnny Dangerously. I had never seen it, and it was great. I loved it. I really liked it a lot. But Joe Piscopo in that, who's like, I know him as a Simpsons punchline. But watching him in that, I was like, okay, people weren't crazy. He's funny in this, you know? Like, I get it.
You could see how in a 1988 episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, Data could go into the holodeck and ask them to generate the funniest comedian in the history of the galaxy, and it creates Joe Piscopo.
Man,
it's the 1 month where that would have been who they chose.
Between that and like the Elon Musk line, Star Trek loves to just immediately date themselves with references.
The thing is, they almost never do, Dalton. It's like the 2 times they did it.
Just Joe Piscopo and Elon Musk. The only 2 times they've maybe gotten it wrong.
It becomes funny again because the guy who says that and makes that reference to Elon Musk is later revealed to be a supervillain from the Mirror Universe.
Okay.
So it all works.
Does that imply that we live in the mirror? You know, like if this universe goes on long enough, it'll become Star Trek's mirror universe.
It's a popular fan theory.
Is it? Am I doing the fucking thing that your tweet? I love the 21st century Looney Tunes fan is like, this implies Bugs Bunny did this. Oh god, I can't believe I just did that.
It's how we all think now. All right, Branson, Dalton and I have some mailbag questions to answer that are very specific to our show that I don't think you'd be necessarily interested in joining us for. So I wanted to give you the opportunity to
do your plugs
plug
now.
Away. Yeah, tell us about what you're up to.
That is so sweet. I have been on some shows that don't offer you that. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah, I'll make my plugs now. Why not? Check out my webcomic, Swan Boy.
It's so good.
Go to swanboy.com. Thank you so much. I really am. I'm proud of it. I'm glad. It's nice to hear you say that.
Yeah.
Go to swanboy.com and read it. Check out my podcast. Root Tales of Magic. It's a D&D, sort of. We very loosely play. We play D&D the way I like research monster movies. So it's like, what's this go there? You know, that kind of vibe. It's very fun, very funny. I'm very proud of it. I'm on another show, speaking of Star Trek, that my friend Joe on Root Tales of Magic. It's the same cast. It's called Oh, Those Stars of Space. And it's a Star Trek like parody show that we do. Very fun.
Oh, far out.
I love it. And buy my book. Buy Hell Was Full. It's wherever you get your books. It's a book of my comics. It's reasonably priced.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Branson, for being on. We will let you go and then answer our mailbag questions. But it was a pleasure having you. Thank you for finally introducing our version of Abbott and Costello into the dark universe.
What a creative answer. It is such a great... I love, we talk about like process, a creative process is such a part of the show. And hearing your logic of how you arrived at this unconventional choice is one of those things that I love, which is that I would never think of it. And then the way you get there feels like, oh, of course it should be that. Well, it's a great idea.
And it's good because like we actively try to never do what people are predicting us to do. Like there were so many names in the hat for Abbott and Costello. And honestly, even though maybe the fans would have liked it, I think it would have been somewhat disappointing if it was like the top names on everyone's list. Like you came up with someone that nobody else listed. And I think that's what we aim to do on this podcast is like the out of left field thing. So we appreciate that.
Well, thank you so much. And this podcast rocks. I'm really glad that you guys are doing this. This is so fun.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Enjoy your night.
Oh, yeah. See you guys.
Have a good one. All right.
What a cool guy.
That was Branson Reese, everybody. But before we go, we do have a couple mailbag questions here. What do we got, Dylan?
Okay. So from our Discord, executive producer Dick Wolf asks, which Dark Universe film from phases 1 or 2 do you think could do best as a silent film? Not one of mine, because they're too talky.
I was actually thinking, my first instinct was Frankenstein, but maybe, obviously Black Lagoon is the one that's always on my mind. But I do think it would be really interesting given how stark the appearance of the Black Lagoon is and how silent that realm is. And the fact that kind of what I'm playing with in that whole movie is not saying the quiet parts loud, right? Like all the stuff about gender and sexuality and stuff completely goes unstated. And I think it would be really interesting to just watch Rita's entire journey silently. And because it's such a visual sort of realm there, I think that could be really interesting. But Frankenstein also just by virtue of being a period piece could be fun, you know, but
I have two thoughts. The first one that came to mind actually was The Invisible Man. Because the comedy is so physical.
Yeah.
And like, obviously you've written so much funny dialogue and there are a lot of bits. Of course, we have the whole thing about how much of the comedy is built around John C. Reilly's voice, which wouldn't be in there. But because it is so slapstick and it's so broad, and it's not really a complicated plot for the most part.
Sure.
I mean, there's the whole invisible vampire thing, but you can convey that visually.
I think, it's all conveyed through action.
Right. I think that actually could potentially work in that style. If I was gonna pick one of mine, and I know that sometimes I think of it because I'm always thinking of ways I think it could be done better than how I wrote it. I think that Jekyll X Hyde maybe could work that way. I think the idea of letting the actors play the complicated emotions and not getting so much into the minutia of where they come from could maybe work. I don't know. Yeah. Maybe it's too windy, but my first pick I think would be The Invisible Man. I think that would be cool.
Yeah, I think that would work.
On Discord, the 78th Doctor asks, having announced a 15 title slate in advance, are you allowing yourselves to pivot and change or revise entries along the way? Like, would you ever cancel one and replace it with another if something came up story-wise a few entries in?
I think we always give ourselves that out. I think part of the fun is the challenge of... We've talked about this, I think, on our announcement episode, but like giving ourselves rules and then trying to stick to them is like sort of the fun of the challenge. So I think part of the fun of the 15 movie slate is just being like, well, let's come up with these lists of movies. Oh, we're doing The Old Dark House. Okay, I don't know what it's going to be, but I'm going to have to come up with something.
Right, because we could have made this list privately and then not announced all of it in that episode. But now by doing this, we've kind of thrown our hats over the wall, where now if we change plans, you'll all know that we've done it. And much like how we make fun of like whatever happened to the Inhumans movie.
Yeah.
Like
you can make fun of us.
Yeah. And so, I mean, like I'm sure it'll be fun to make fun of us should that happen.
But that's we give ourselves the out. Like the last thing I want, even more than being embarrassed by all of you making fun of me, is to come here with a bad pitch. And so if there's something that like I really just can't think of anything that I find interesting or worth sharing, then yeah, we might have to pivot. But I honestly have ideas for just about every movie on the slate already. I mean, I just sort of all the movies I was worried about, I sort of had breakthroughs about this past week. So the one movie that I probably have the least ideas for is The Old Dark House.
But you have the longest runway.
Yes, I have a lot of time to figure that out. So that can always happen. We're already giving ourselves the possibility of a second holiday special, which...
Right. And I also did the math wrong in the last one. That would only get us to 29.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Oh, fuck.
Because we are at 28 right now.
Well, then we'll do
So we'd have to do 2 more things. And that is the biggest change I think I'd want to make. And it really depends on how exhausted we are, right? Because 28's not as ugly a number to me as 29 is, actually. But 30 would be great.
30 would be great.
It would be funny if it would be 30 because like more than half of them will have been phase 3.
We'll split the holiday special into the Christmas special and the Hanukkah special.
Yeah,
and
cool.
There we go. We'll do 2 of them in 1 month.
Yeah, that's way easier. That'll definitely solve our problem.
Sure.
But yeah, that's the thing is that like I find it so much easier to write when you give me when you put a lot of pressure on me and I have certain boxes that I have to check. Because then once I've checked those, it opens up my head to do a lot of crazier stuff like I'm doing a musical or now it's an anthology or something like that. So I would hesitate, apart from the whole getting to a nice round number thing. I would kind of hesitate to make any changes. But you'll find out, right? Like we will never say never.
Yeah.
Next thing. This is not so much a question as just something that I have to acknowledge. Since the last episode, since the season premiere aired, we have been bombarded from all sides on all social media about how I did not name my horror movie Field of Dreams spin Field of Screams.
You can, which, speaking of giving you an out, you can still change it to Field of Screams if you want to.
I am of 2 minds about it. For one thing, Field of Screams is a joke title. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that I want the movie to have a joke title. I know that I want it to be a sort of horror comedy, but I don't know that I want to go that broad with it. Field of Screams sounds like the Universal Studios ride based on Field of Nightmares.
Yeah, it sounds like a Halloween event type thing. It sounds like a hayride, a haunted hayride.
Yeah. So that's the other thing. I think that I get it. It is clearly a very obvious miss, but I can't claim that I had thought of it and then discarded it. It did not occur to me. We'll see what happens. I am not averse to doing the snakes on a plane thing here and just letting the fans
into it,
give them the title they want. It's certainly
I've had it with these motherfucking screams in this motherfucking field.
It's the kind of bone I'm willing to throw. I talk about trying not to be too fan guided. But that's a treat that I could toss the audience that would cost me nothing. So we'll decide whether or not I think you
have
deserve
a lot
it.
of runway. Yeah.
Yes.
That's 2025, I believe.
That's December 2025. Talking about like weird schedule things. I feel really stupid that my baseball episode is going to come out in the dead of winter.
Yeah.
But sometimes that does happen. Like sometimes you do put out because if you're going for I'm trying to think of like a Halloween movie that came out in July, for example, Halloween H2O, summer blockbuster.
The Haunted Mansion.
Yeah. So it can happen. So anyway, just thought I would acknowledge it. I agree. It's good bit. I have to decide whether or not it's a fit for the project.
Good bit, maybe not a fit.
I was unaware, by the way, that Spotify has a Q&A box under every episode, so people can write us things in the Spotify
Have people
app.
been leaving things?
People have left us things, mostly not questions, just like because the question that defaults to is, what did you think of the episode? So it's mostly just people saying nice
section.
Things. Yeah.
Oh, I know. I want to read these. Is it publicly viewable or
only if I publish them, which I think the nice things I think I've started doing. So thank you for those of you who have done that. Sorry that we haven't been getting back to you. I just literally did not know.
Yeah, I didn't know that was a feature.
So here is one question from Thad. This is for you, Dalton.
Okay.
How is Salamandra Ghirardelli spelled? Because that's the wildest name I've ever heard for a horror character. Do you know that offhand, or do you need to look it up?
Salamandra. So this is the character in The Bride and Frankenstein, the lizard lady. So I really like when I have a twist plan to sort of give all of the clues in as subtle a way as possible. So she is Salamandra because she is the lizard woman, and salamanders very heat resistant. And of course, the big twist with her is that she is flame retardant, and that's why her death by burning does not kill her. So Salamandra is spelled like salamander, but instead of the ER at the end, it's RA. Salamandra. And then Ghirardelli is spelled like the chocolates. And the reason her last name is Ghirardelli is because she is named after an actual performer, a flame retardant woman who would do a lot of like heat tricks, like going in an oven and surviving and, fire swallowing and things like that. And I was reading... I was doing a lot of research on, like those kinds of circus performers and stunt people and things like that. And I believe she is the first like flame resistant woman on record. So she is named after her. So yes, Salamandra Ghirardelli.
All right, far out. Well, that's all the questions. I mean, obviously, we fielded a lot of questions in the season premiere. So and
on our bonus episodes.
And our bonus. Oh, it's plug time for us. Yeah. We've been answering questions on every episode of our monthly bonus podcast, Are You Afraid of Dylan and Dalton? Those are only where we answer questions not specifically pertaining to the Dark Universe. Mm-hmm. So if you're curious about our feelings about other movies or just our creative lives or really anything, that's where we take those. That, of course, is for patrons. It's exclusive for people who subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/Dylan and Dalton. You can sign up there for $5 a month. You can get a 7-day free trial where you get to join our wonderful Discord community and listen to the bonus pod and sometimes this other stuff we throw up on there.
And we do movie screenings once a month, and you can join us for those. And so sign up for that. We will be back in 2 weeks with the Dark Universe Holiday Special.
We are in the midst of...
We're writing it right now.
We're in the middle of writing it. Yes. We're actually recording pretty far in advance now, so we're not on such a crazy crunch. Not like they have 2 weeks to finish it. No, we have like a month. We're going to be okay. But so we've got high hopes for that. We hope you're all excited.
We have a lot of fun stuff
significantly
planned.
Shorter than Heaven's Gate was. And speaking of which, this is going to come in being one of the shorter episodes we've done that's not like part 1 of 2.
Yeah, and at least since phase 1.
Yeah.
But so until we see you for the holiday special, stay afraid of the Dark Universe.